we are going to just kind of start off this video where I have already finished Will. I meant to do videos talking about, you know, my experience of reading this book, you know, as I was reading it, but I haven't really had the time to. I've had a lot of things personally that have been going on, but I did finish the book today and have started Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith, and I do have some thoughts that I would like to address starting off, and I will be hopefully remembering to update with Worthy more so. But let's talk about Will by Will Smith and Mark Manson. So first of all, Will got a 4 out of 5 stars from me. I am not discounting anything in terms of personal experience. I'm not discounting anything in terms of the things that how he viewed it, especially in terms of things like the abuse that he dealt with as a child and growing up, and his experiences, you know, with stardom as he started becoming a big superstar. I'm not going to talk really on anything in terms of his experience in with his marriages and anything like that. I will say I disagree with a lot of the choices that he made as a person. I think that there's a lot of choices he made that I think would have not, were not good and could have been resolved in a different way. But I can only speak to that because of the fact that I'm an outsider. I'm not somebody that is making those choices actively. I am not Will, you know, obviously. And a lot of those choices were made many years before I ever, you know, read about him doing them, and so I have no room to really criticize him in terms of choices he made, and the things that happened as a result of that. What I will say is that I think that this memoir was very long-winded. I think there's a lot of things that he waxed poetic on that could have been reduced significantly. I understand the importance of why he wrote in a certain way. I do think that this book was more so of him trying to not only reflect on a lot of the things that he had experienced, but also to provide a sense of understanding of the fact that, like, people need to understand how he viewed things, how he dealt with things, and how he has become a better person, and understood a lot of things since then. And I think that the reason he becomes so poetic about the way in which he describes his experiences is because he is coming from a very spiritual place that he has reached as the man he is now. Or at least how he was when he was writing this in 2020, 2021, the time that the book had originally come out. So there's a lot of things that I personally, writing-wise, felt was a little too long-winded, a little too much for me, but I also am speaking from a place where I don't understand, you know, fully what this man went through. I also don't understand spiritually where he is, because I am not Will himself. I am not a person that is able to speak on those things in the manner of which Will understands it, because he understands his own mind better than I will ever. So personally, I just found that it wasn't, you know, something that was impactful to me in terms of understanding him. I understand him a lot better, and I can appreciate and empathize and sympathize with him for a lot of the things that he dealt with that I either also dealt with or understand to a certain degree. But I don't feel like that, for instance, like other memoirs I've read that I've given 5 stars to, I wasn't as emotionally moved by this book. I feel like that a lot of what he said were things that I either already knew or I already kind of understood. And I definitely feel like that this was more so a book that was intended for those that know next to nothing about him, and also maybe don't understand a lot of the complexities of a celebrity's life, especially one in which where they are as prolific as Will Smith. I mean, Will has been in the game since the late 80s. He's been, you know, he rocketed up into stardom when especially his movie career took off. And so I think that this book was more so meant for somebody that knew very little about the man, and also, like I said, doesn't understand the complexities of being a celebrity and the mental strain and emotional strain that can put on a person. And I understand there's a lot of people who are like, well, you know, celebrities shouldn't have anything to worry about. They shouldn't be feeling these things because they have all this money and they have all this fame, you know, yada, yada, yada. But the thing is that they are still people. And I think that this memoir was meant more so for people to read who don't believe celebrities are people as well, and have their own lives and have their own struggles and come from places where they struggled or they had to make a name for themselves to put themselves in a better place. I think that a lot of people tend to think that celebrities are untouchable, and they aren't. They are not as removed from the rest of society as people think they are. And I think that this definitely really showcased that, which I greatly appreciate. However, I've seen it before, you know, kind of thing. So I just wasn't as emotionally moved by this as I think I would have been if I had believed that Will was untouchable and that he was, you know, anything more than a celebrity that he's made himself up to be. So, I think that within that, it kind of gives me a little bit more of a chance to remove myself from the memoir and have a little bit different, more psychological perspective. Like, I don't know. I just feel like that this felt different to me than how I've read other memoirs where I've been really moved by them because I don't know the person as well. I grew up with Will Smith. Will Smith was a huge part of my upbringing with movies and TV shows and things like that. So, and music too. Like, my dad loves Will Smith's music. He was a huge fan of them. He was an artist that we listened to very regularly. So I felt like I kind of knew him as a celebrity more than the average person. I've seen Independence Day. I've seen Men in Black. I've seen I Am Legend and I, Robot and all of these movies that he was in. Bad Boys was a big one when my parents were watching it. Like, that was one I remember very fondly watching and enjoying. So like, I enjoyed his work. I've seen The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you know, so I have more of a connection to Will, and so then therefore I was able to, I think, distance myself from the memoir a little bit more. And in all honesty, I am one of those people where I don't see celebrities as untouchable. I don't see them as, you know, more than a person. I see them as a person that has feelings, that deals with things, that it did not come out of the womb as a star. Like, he did not come from a place where he was like a Kardashian, for instance. He had to work to get where he wanted to. And I am somebody that respects that hustle. So I feel like that with this memoir, I was able to distance myself a little bit more from it and review it more in a way that was like, okay, let's look at the choices that he made growing up. Were they smart choices? Were they not so smart? Did I, you know, agree with anything that he did? And so because of that more removed kind of perspective, it didn't necessarily give me a lot of ability to emotionally get involved with what he was doing. Now, like I said, I can empathize and sympathize with a lot of what he dealt with and a lot of the things that he's experienced. But again, I'm not Will. I didn't go through those things. And so again, I don't have as much of an emotional stake in, you know, reading this. Now, in terms of Worthy, I know next to nothing about Jada Pinkett Smith. All I know is that she at one point had a music career that was very short-lived. She has a very small kind of acting thing. I don't really know. Otherwise, I just know her as Will Smith's wife. And that's not necessarily good. I think that there is definitely more substance to her than that, and I would like to be able to see that in her memoir, which actually was released here in October of 2023, so it's a little bit more new, it's a little bit more recent, and so there's going to be probably a lot of things about hers and Will's relationship that is going to be divulged more so than it was in Will's memoir. So I'm interested to see how her view of things was, especially about their relationship, because he did talk about how at one point they did kind of separate for a while and they each did their own thing. They've both talked about using ayahuasca, which is a medicine used in South America, used by native tribes down there, which I thought was very interesting, but I do think that they used it individually at different times, which I thought was very, very interesting. I did not know, first of all, that either of them had done that, but secondly, I didn't realize that that played so much of a factor in their respective healings of themselves. And so learning a little bit about that has been really kind of eye-opening. I'm curious though with Worthy, again, to see how Jada's view of things was. Did she view things in the same way as Will, or what was her perspective of their relationship when things were not as good? And again, especially since this is a little bit more of a recent memoir and is very likely going to touch on more recent topics within their relationship, how is it that she views especially the attention that it got in society through social media, like with the slap, with the fact that her affair was, you know, aired out, or she revealed that she was having an affair, or she had an affair supposedly with somebody. You know, I'm curious to see not necessarily whether or not I like her more than Will, but I'm curious to see whether or not I feel more of an emotional connection to this book because of the fact I don't know Jada as well, and I don't know her story as much as I do Will's, and I am just curious to see if I find to connect with her a little bit more, and if I get the same result out of this story, or if I find that I enjoyed it more because of the emotional connection that I may get with this. So yeah, I think that that's all I'm going to say for right now. Overall, I feel like this is going to be an interesting video. It's going to be an interesting video for me in particular when looking at both of these memoirs and seeing the differences in terms of the stories and the ways that they're told. Also, the way in which, like I said, emotionally, how do I feel about, you know, each individual person? My prediction is that I'm going to not necessarily find as much of an emotional connection with Jada. Again, because I don't really know much about her. But then again, you know, you never know. I could be completely wrong. I could really emotionally connect with her and find that I emotionally connected with her more than Will. So, I don't know. We shall see. But I'm going to go. I have some stuff I have to do before I continue with Worthy. But I'm only right now in the first chapter where she's talking a lot about, you know, specifically in the first part of the story, her childhood growing up. And right now she's talking a lot about her grandmother, who she was extremely close with, which I can relate to. There's a lot of things in which she talks about with her grandmother and the things that they did that I relate to in terms of things that I did with my grandmother, or I do with my grandmother and did when I was a child. And so I'm finding that I'm relating to her in some ways with that, but I'm only now in the first chapter, so I haven't really gotten very far into it. I am curious though to see the ayahuasca stuff. How does all of that play into her experience with the ayahuasca, and just like what happened with Will, and understanding what it is about her that she finds while in her trip that helps her to heal, because I really liked learning about how it was that Will started to heal after taking ayahuasca and experiencing what he did. So anyway, that's it for right now. I will talk to you guys when I made some more progress in Worthy and what my thoughts are.
Hey guys, so I'm currently on a break because the kiddos I'm working with today are in a special right now. So they're like in their special, like art, science, technology, anything like that. But I did want to talk because I'm almost done with Worthy. I'm in like the last handful of chapters, like the last like probably 20 to 30 pages. And I have some thoughts, and I've been talking about this a little bit with like my mom and my sister, just, you know, because we're fans of Will Smith, more particularly because personally with Jada, I only ever knew her as Will's wife. Like I didn't really know that she was a dancer, an actress, a singer, anything like that. Mainly because like I never saw anything with her in it. I don't know like why. What I found between Will's memoir and Jada's is that a lot of things are lining up in terms of the timeline, things like that. The biggest thing though that is the biggest difference that I've seen is the fact that Jada talks more about the actual separation with Will and what it was. Will very briefly in his memoir touches on the fact that he and Jada separate in like 2016, but doesn't really indicate whether or not, you know, they come back together. It doesn't really indicate anything about like having an open relationship like Jada does, which is a little off-putting to me, mostly because of how he acts when it's actually brought up. When people find out what happened with their relationship and Jada has the Red Table Talk show going on, when the entanglement comes up and everything and Jada decides to talk about it on her show, the Red Table Talk, and brings Will on, there's this like thing where she talks about where Will basically is like making a big scene of things and how he's like a victim of this entire situation, how he was wronged and all this stuff. And at the time when I heard about it initially, I felt bad for Will because I didn't understand from Jada's perspective what was going on. And now, obviously, having read this, I understand more of the situation, at least from her perspective. But Will doesn't really touch on it at all in his memoir, where he would have had the room to, because his memoir came out in 2021 when a lot of the stuff had already passed in terms of the entanglement and the separation and, you know, all these things. And they specifically separated because they didn't want to get divorced, but they needed their own time apart because they'd spent pretty much most of their adult lives together, you know, had, you know, their kids, and basically spent most of their 20s, their 30s, and their 40s together, and they felt like they needed like some separation. And within that, you know, the ability to then have more of an open relationship and seeing other people even though they are still married, which is common for people who are separated but are not yet divorced. It's pretty common. So my whole thought process with this is, first of all, I'm a little off-put that Will didn't really talk about it, almost as if like he wanted to avoid the conversation in general from his perspective, whether or not it was going to be more like victim-y, like if he thought that that was going to be the case, or like if he just thought it was completely unnecessary and better to just paint the picture of him and Jada's relationship as still perfect, in a perfect marriage, even though they're not really like together much anymore. And I find that I don't necessarily agree with one person more than the other. Don't get me wrong. I don't feel like I agree with anyone's choices more than the other. I think that both Jada and Will have had things happen where they've made poor choices and seen the consequences of those poor choices, and they recognize their poor choices. I do respect, though, Jada a lot more. And I think because of the fact that she was open and honest about what the relationship between her and her beau was in the entanglement, and how it was something where she felt she could trust him. And she felt that she could trust Will with respecting this separation, respecting the setup that they had for this, where it was going to be more open. It was going to be, they were allowed to see other people because they did not want to be together. They wanted to be separate, but did not want to necessarily go through the whole hassle of a divorce at the same time. Whether or not that would have worked, we'll never know, because obviously things being as they were kind of all got jumbled up and stuff. So, it's an interesting thing to look at both Will's perspective and Jada's and see things in a very different light. Like, obviously, Jada has her own history of things, has her own history of, like, familial issues that are very different from what Will dealt with, mind you, to some degree. But she even had a very different perspective of how the relationship was with her and Will, based on her past trauma. And I do appreciate how in both respective memoirs there is a lot of discovery and a lot of reflection of things that had happened that shouldn't have happened, or that did happen, and the consequences came out and there were lessons learned. I do appreciate that for both memoirs. I think that that's why I've really enjoyed reading these. And like I said, I don't think one is more wrong or right than the other. I just think that, in all honesty, especially when it comes to the whole thing of the separation and the entanglement and all that, and the red table talk that followed, I think I just respect Jada more than I do Will, considering how Will made it seem like it was this brand new thing, and he was just finding out for the first time that she had a relationship outside of the marriage, even though they both agreed to allow that to happen. And I think that him painting himself as a victim of any kind of circumstance is a little bit off-putting to me, especially since he doesn't even talk about it in his memoir. It just seems like that he just conveniently forgot that, or conveniently neglected to mention any of that because of how it would make him look, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that's just complete conjecture on my part, but I just, for some reason, that kind of sets me off a little bit. And I just feel like I find a lot more respect with Jada for being honest about it and for putting herself out there to where she, you know, publicly announced that this happened and what it was, and, you know, received the backlash that she did for it, and being able to still stay standing, because in a lot of other women's shoes, they would not be doing as well as Jada is currently. I'm sure she's dealing with a lot mentally, you know, post that, especially now with like the slap that happened, which I have yet to reach that point in it. That is something that she talks about at all. I don't know whether or not she's going to talk about it in this book. That's kind of my thoughts on it right now. Like I said, memoirs are so hard to like rate necessarily, because I don't want to like discount anything that the person has written on, or like the logic of it. I read it more so in terms of like, how did I feel about reading the memoir, the life story of somebody? Did I find it to be, you know, done eloquently? Did I find it to be done in a way that makes me feel closer to the person? Like with Will's memoir, I was a little bit more removed, because I think that there was just a little bit, I don't know, like there was just something about it where I couldn't just give it a 5-star. I felt like I was just very removed from his entire life in some ways, and I feel like there was a lot of things that could have been called down, whereas I feel like with Worthy, I appreciate how she goes about and talks in depth about some things and her thought patterns, and I think this is a shorter book. I'm fairly certain this is shorter than Will's book was, because Will's was like over 400 pages and this is not quite like 400. I think that this one, the brevity is better in this one. I think that she doesn't take too long to talk about any one thing, and the events that she encapsulates in these stories are snapshots, but they feel like, you know, like you're watching, you know, them play out in front of you like a whole movie kind of thing. And I appreciate too how she does, you know, delve into, at the end of each chapter, like an exercise for somebody else that is reading this to like do some self-reflection, and really encouraging, you know, that spiritual mental journey of figuring yourself out and your worth in this world, outside of things that people deem to be making you worthy, like being as a mom, as a, you know, daughter, as a celebrity, as a person in general. Like, where is the worth coming from? So I'm enjoying this one a lot more, and I think that I just respect Jada a lot more than I do Will, for a lot of reasons. I think that a lot of the issues that arose from what I've seen of both sides is more on Will's part, but again, like, this is just my stupid opinion. Like, y'all have your own thoughts on this. This is just from what I'm reading. It seems like obviously these two needed more marriage counseling, but it seems like Will was a lot of times the instigator of a lot of things, and self-admittedly, he's talked about previously, like, a lot of things he would start just because, and like, he's talked about a lot of times how he was his own worst enemy, and I would agree. I think that especially watching things from Jada's perspective, he was his own worst enemy. He was literally standing in the way of his entire marriage, and quite honestly, I think that he continues to do so because of events like the slap. Like, that wasn't really necessary. There was a way to go about that. You did that to make a spectacle for whatever reason. Anyway, so that's my thoughts for right now. I'm gonna finish up Worthy here hopefully soon. I only have a little bit of time before my kiddos get back, and then I have tutoring tonight, so I have to like scoot on home. Scoot on home, that's what I meant to say. And my audiobook that I borrowed from the library got returned because I took too long to listen to it, but I only have, like I said, like 20 to 30 pages left of the book, so I'll finish that up tonight, and I think more so give my final thoughts, because like with 20-30 pages left, there's not much more I'm gonna really like have to say, unless there's something like catastrophic that gets brought up or something like that I need to discuss in any capacity. But otherwise, I will catch you guys probably later tonight.
So it's been a couple days since I last talked to you. I have since finished Worthy and just hadn't had the time to sit down and like give my final thoughts on this versus Will. Overall, Worthy ended up getting a 5 out of 5 stars from me. I absolutely loved the way that this was created from beginning to end, and we did literally almost immediately after I last talked to you got into the whole thing about the slap, and understanding things more from Jada's perspective. The whole thing is just completely uncalled for. The whole thing, from Chris Rock's jokes in general to what Will did in response to that, was completely uncalled for. And I understand that these two have a history and like there's been some animosity between the two of them, but that doesn't matter. There should never be that kind of a physical altercation regardless. And if anything, I think that that embarrassed Jada more than anything else, because of the fact that, you know, not only was somebody making jokes at her expense, but then her husband goes up and does this thing that is, you know, detrimental really to his career and to the credibility of him. And I do appreciate though how she did want to stand by him regardless, and how she wanted to, you know, be there in this time of need. Like, obviously that is part of the marriage vows, is to be with each other through good times and through bad. And I respect that Jada really kind of figured her things out to where she and Will could have maybe a little bit more of a loving relationship, even if necessarily it's not the same as it was, and it's not exactly what people would consider to be in terms of a traditional marriage. I do think that in light of everything that I've read from Will's side and from Jada's side, again, I do think that I respect Jada more as an individual than I respect Will. I still have a lot of respect for Will as a, you know, creator, as a person, as an artist. You know, I have a lot of respect for him and what he's done and the things that he has created and the things that he's done to pave the way for other Black young men in the theater and movie world. And I think that there are things he did that I just don't agree with as much, and then therefore they kind of made me lose a little bit of respect for him in terms of how he's dealt with things, especially more so recently. I think that a lot of the choices he's made recently have really made me question him as an individual, whereas with Jada, I feel like that from the beginning, the decisions that she made, I understand a little bit clearer. I don't necessarily agree with all of them again, but I do respect her more because I think that she has learned from a lot of her mistakes, whereas I feel as if Will has really not. And I think that that is evident in the way that Jada's memoir is constructed, where it's a lot more reflective. It's a lot more coming from a place of enlightenment of sorts, whereas Will's felt very much more like he was just telling his story as if he was telling it to somebody he's never met, kind of thing. So I think that the way that each of these was written is very indicative of each individual person in terms of where they are in their life, or where they were in their life when writing this. Obviously Will, this was before a lot of the backlash came from the Red Table Talk podcast episode. This was also before the slap and everything, and so his was a little bit more of him telling the story without really being as reflective. In some parts, definitely, when looking at his childhood and stuff, he was a little bit more reflective of how those things may have affected him, and especially as some of the bigger things in his life came up, how he had handled it, whether or not he handled it well, what was it about the way he handled it that indicated something that he had yet to really look into in terms of his mental psyche and all these things. But with Jada's, it felt a lot more, you know, really reflective. Going as far as creating journal prompts of sorts for the end of each chapter that is themed around what the chapter was really about, and having quotes that really exemplify what the chapter was about and what it is that she has learned from the experiences and the things that she has gone through since childhood. I think that that just made me respect her a lot more. It felt more like I was learning from her of her life and the things that she's learned from having gone through it. Like, I was looking more from a mentor's perspective than I was with Will. Overall, I don't necessarily think that one memoir is 100%, you know, better than the other. I think that not every person has a memoir that is going to hit the taste of every single individual. So this is really the hard thing for me with memoirs, is the rating of them. It's usually 4 or 5 stars, and usually the reason it's a 4-star, like with Will's, is that I didn't feel like I got as much out of it. I felt like I didn't really get to understand what the point was in him making his memoir, other than telling his life story as a Black male actor, which is incredibly important in bringing in his voice to the playing field when it comes to, you know, talking about his experience and the things that he went through. I just didn't feel like I understood it as much as I did with Jada. And I think Jada's was a lot more introspective, that I tend to look for with memoir than I saw with Will. It's really hard to say which one I think was better, quote unquote, than the other, because each one is good within their own rights. I just personally think I got more out of Jada's memoir than I did Will's. And that's basically it. So I know a lot of people who've read both of them have kind of picked a side in terms of who they think is, you know, more in the right with a lot of the things that happen between Will and Jada, whether it's Will or Jada, depending on what you thought of their memoirs. I'm not going to pick a side. It's not a fight that I need to get involved in. It is not a fight I have any stake in. Truthfully, I think that both sides, there were things that needed to get worked on, but they didn't. And there were consequences from not working on those things. And so, again, I have no stake in the matter. It's not my relationship that is being looked at in these books. Therefore, I really have nothing to say on whether or not I agree with one more than the other. All I can say is that they both need to get their shit figured out. That's it. That's pretty much all I would have to say on that. So, sorry if you were looking for more of like, oh, who do I pick? Who do I pick? No, like that's not what I'm about. That's not what I got out of this entire experience. I think too that doing something like that is a little ridiculous, because it's not your relationship. It is a relationship between two other people who, yes, they made a lot of things very public and, you know, available to be scrutinized and, you know, looked at, but it's not my place to say whether or not I think one person is more in the right than the other, because I'm not their therapist, I'm not their marriage counselor, I'm not Jada, I'm not Will. I'm some random ass woman that is white from the Midwest. My opinion of their relationship is nothing. It doesn't matter. And even if it did matter, it shouldn't, because my opinion of how somebody else deals with their relationship and deals with the issues of their relationship is neither here nor there. If you really want to get that involved in somebody's relationship like that, go into marriage counseling. That's as far as I can tell you, because honestly, like, if you want to get that involved in somebody else's relationship that has absolutely nothing to do with you, get into marriage counseling. Might be a good career. I know a lot of people that make good money doing it. So anyway, those are my final thoughts on the whole Will versus Worthy memoir battle, I guess. I don't even know if I would call it so much a battle. It's more of just like a look at these two and a comparison of these two and how their stories were developed, and more so how I emotionally felt when reading these. Like, how did I feel when reading these stories? Did I feel pulled more to these people because of the things that I learned about them? Which I did. I did feel more emotionally pulled to both Will and Jada when learning more about their lives. I empathized and sympathized with them on a lot of things that they dealt with, even though I, you know, am very different from them in a lot of ways. I was able to recognize a lot of the pain and the suffering that they both went through, but then also be excited to see the things that they did that were good, and, you know, see the things that they were able to accomplish and feel happy for them because they were extraordinary things for them. So that was kind of what I was looking for initially going into this, was that I wanted to really see whether or not these were memoirs I was going to get pulled into, and whether or not I was going to be enjoying them and enjoying the writing style that they did, and enjoying the way that they were crafting their stories of their lives, which for both was incredibly entertaining. I think that they are very, very good writers, both of them. They have very different types of voices, as can be evident because they are two very different types of people. And if you were to look at each person individually, Will versus Jada, as like personalities, they are very different in terms of the way that they handle things, and the way that they communicate, and the way that they actually, you know, also showcase themselves to others. Jada's a little bit more on the introspective, you know, very analytical, but also very emotional side of things, whereas Will is just trying to be the funny guy. Anything he can do for a laugh, he's going to do, because there's a lot of trauma that he's dealt with that needs to be addressed. So I think that that lends very well to the way that they tell their stories of their lives, and I think that they both did a fantastic job, and I would definitely like to be able to get physical copies of both of these for my own personal collection, because I enjoyed them that much. And I would definitely, you know, recommend them as memoirs if you're looking for especially celebrity memoirs. These are definitely ones to go for. These are very easy to get into, especially if you're already fans of Will and or Jada. I think that they are just really incredibly well done, and I think that they really exemplify these people in the best way possible by showcasing the good and the bad. But anyway, I'm gonna quit yakking for right now. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to meet and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in the next video. Bye guys.